welcome to the second episode of the SBK Saturday Night Selections. It's going to be a bit more of a low-key show this time around. We started off on a bit of a high with the Kentucky Derby. We've got Belmont to focus on this time around, and also some European contenders as well. But as I say, last week it was a 20 runner by runner analysis of the Kentucky Derby, just a 6 to look at in the Manor War this time around. But one thing does stay constant. I'm Luke Elder, and I'm being joined once again by Tom Collins. Tom, how are you doing?
Yes, really good, Luke. Not as well as I was last week heading into the Kentucky Derby, now knowing the result. But there's plenty to talk about, which is always great for this podcast. Hopefully we'll have a few more winners this week.
Yes. Well, we'll start with the Kentucky Derby because we did a runner-by-runner analysis and we didn't mention the winner.
Yeah, I mean, that takes some doing, doesn't it? Yes, unfortunately, Ethereal Road, who was number 20, who we covered, was taken out prior to the podcast going live, but after we filmed, Rich Strike comes in as number 21. Who wins? Of course, number 21, Rich Strike.
Just for listeners, viewers, to take us through your comments for Rich Strike, because I would imagine it would be absolute certainty he can't possibly get beaten, right?
Oh, yeah, he was a good thing, no matter what. He was heading into the Kentucky Derby with a best buyer speed figure on dirt of 64. Tiber's best buyer speed figure on dirt was 103. So, look, he was the horse to beat, Rich Strike. He ran okay on his prior start in synthetics, posting a buy of 84, but still had 20 spots to make up. Basically, he was a no-hope, a reserve, coming in from the widest gate. He was claimed for just 30K in September. He had no chance. He was 80 to 1 on the board. If he was 800 to 1, I wouldn't have looked twice, Luke.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. But he did manage to win the Kentucky Derby. News after the race, he's not going to go for the Preakness. He's going to go for the Belmont, which makes sense logistically. Obviously, you're not going to get a Triple Crown horse, but he's by Keen Ice. He's bred to stay. But we've had sort of disagreements over the last week of whether it's a good idea, bad idea. I said to you, I wouldn't blame them if they retired him on the spot after the Kentucky Derby, but he's going to go for the Belmont.
Yeah, he's going for the Belmont. I think it's a poor decision. Look, the Belmont's probably the best race suited to him, but you only get one shot having a Triple Crown winner. You don't get a Triple Crown winner every year. And Eric Reed, when's the next time he's even going to have a horse that could even contest a Kentucky Derby, let alone the Triple Crown? So I think he should be running in the Preakness. I don't think he would win it. Don't get me wrong. I think he'll be beaten by the likes of Epicenter, who we have to say, just touching back on the Kentucky Derby, Epicenter ran a phenomenal race. He was 6th round in the first bend. And in that event, Summer is Tomorrow, who actually led the field out, the UAE Derby second, he went 21.78 seconds through the first quarter, which is the fastest in Kentucky Derby history. As I said, you have to run to a speed figure around 110 to win the Kentucky Derby. If Summer is Tomorrow carried on that speed figure that he ran in the first quarter, which was 169, he would have been by far the best Kentucky Derby winner in history. They just went far too quick. And Epicenter was 6th early. Every other horse around him up on the speed faded. Epicenter still managed to sustain his effort, finish 2nd in the Kentucky Derby for Steve Asmussen. By far the best horse in the race, we have to admit. Rich Strike was helped by the pace bias and compromised front runners. He came through. But if Epicenter runs in the Preakness, he'll probably win that. If Rich Strike was in the Preakness, I would be very confident that he wouldn't beat Epicenter. Saying that, I still think connections should go there because, as I say, you only get one chance at winning the Triple Crown. Rich Strike now cannot by heading towards the Belmont.
Yes, so he's not going to be going to Pimlico on the 21st. He'll be going towards Belmont in a few weeks' time. Now, one thing you said there has surprised me because just after the race, you were Team Zandon, I was Team Epicenter. Much like we were before the race, you have switched allegiances to Epicenter.
Yes, so after the race, obviously, sometimes you do talk through your pocket, I have to say. Everyone does it. Everyone does it slightly. And after the race, I was thinking, Epicenter's run a very good race, but I thought Zandon should have beaten Epicenter. Maybe not one, because obviously Rich Strike was an anomaly. No one could have forecast that. But I thought Zandon was perhaps the best horse in the race. However, after watching the race many times back this week, I think Epicenter was the best horse. Zandon got a good trip. He got bumped around at the start, which wasn't ideal, but Flavian Pratt thereafter had the perfect trip up the inside rail, tracked through Epicenter, pounced in the straight, and he just didn't have enough horse to pass Epicenter. I thought potentially if he got a clean start, it would have been a different outcome. I was wrong. I think Epicenter was the best horse in the race. He sat close to a very, very fast gallop and still sustained his effort and beat the likes of Zandon, who closed him off the speed. Mo Donegal, who was 5th as well, still managed to fend him off. I think Epicenter is the best 3-year-old at the moment, and he's going to take a lot of beating in the Preakness.
Yeah, I agree with that. Whether he'd be a Belmont horse, I doubt. He's got a lot of speed about himself. There was a point at the top of the straight that, again, I said to you just after the race, he quickened about, must have been about 3 lengths clear or so, and you thought, wow, this is going to be impressive. But he just couldn't keep up that gallop, and understandably so. You mentioned the opening quarter for Sunrise tomorrow. I think his opening half was 45 and 3.
Yeah,
which, I mean, that's too fast for a mile field, a 7 furlong field. Never mind a Kentucky Derby. That they were going a ruthless early fractions, and he kind of joined in with that.
Yeah, Larry Colmus, his commentary, phenomenal, by the way. We should mention how good the commentary was. But he was shocked by it as well. He was expecting 47, 48, I'm sure. And he goes, whoa, 45 and 3. It was electric early fractions. We're not going to get that this week in the feature race we're going to cover.
I just want to say as well, I want to dob Tom in for something. Last week, we only had one outtake on the show, and that was Tom saying the early fractions for the Kentucky Derby. Said they're going to go a strong early fractions. They'll go, I don't know, 46 and a quarter. Like, oh, no, scratch that. 46 and 3/4. And they went faster than your time that you said when you were joking / wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I thought they were going to go very hard. There was so much speed in there. And even the fact that Classic Causeway, who was one of the front runners, missed the kick, they still went the fastest opening quarter and half in Kentucky Derby history. It was phenomenal. A brilliant race to watch. Surprise result, but you've got to love it.
One thing we do agree on after the race, though, and the final thing we'll touch on with the Kentucky Derby, Mo Donegal, how far in the Belmont?
Oh, yeah, he wins the Belmont, no doubt. Look, he got a terrible trip in the Kentucky Derby. He was broken from the inside gate. He was stuffed against the fence for much of the contest. Then he had to switch 10 wide, basically, round in the home bend as the leaders all faltered. Stayed on well for 5th. There's loads of stamina in his pedigree. He runs like he's going to appreciate the extra distance. I'd be shocked if he lost the Belmont, Luke.
Yeah, that race is ideal for him, Mo Donegal. But that's to come in the next few weeks. Rich Strike, the one we didn't mention, takes out the Kentucky Derby last week. Albeit, I will say, the horses we did mention, we nailed the forecast. So well done to you.
Yeah, good work there. We got the 2nd and the 3rd, which is some doing, but yeah, unfortunately not the winner.
Yeah, go team. We'll do the same this week. Luckily, whatever happens, we're going to mention the winner this week because there are no reserves in the Man of War. There are 6 going to post a Mile 3 the trip. There are European interests in the race with Yabir going over, but we're again going to do a runner by runner analysis, and I've been given the odd numbers to do. So I will start off with Easter, who is one of the interesting runners in the race. He's a horse that in the past has come over from France. He had some fairly smart form over there. He did contest the French 2000 Guineas as well, albeit he was 10th behind St. Mark's Basilica on that occasion. But he's not long been over in America. He's only had one run at Aqueduct. That was over a fair bit shorter than this as well. He stayed on nicely, but he was one place behind So High, who is just about the only pace angle in this race. But it's going to be interesting to see how Easter does improve from first and second start.
Yes, number 2 in the Man of War is Gufo, one of the leading players. He's a 5-year-old son of Declaration of War, hails from Christophe Clement's barn. He's been prolific throughout his career. He's won 8 from 15 starts. He's a deep closer with a wicked turn of foot. Finished 2nd in this race last year. Whether he'll go one better, I'm not too sure, but he's 7-5 on the morning line.
Yes, the morning line, I think, is a little bit off with this one because Yabir is even money on the morning line. If he's even money, then go crazy, do whatever you want. But he was disappointing last time around. He was beaten at 1-4 at Newmarket. He was beaten at Maidan as well. However, he's 2 from 2 over in America. He won the Breeders' Cup. He managed to win here at Belmont as well in the Jockey Club Derby Invitational. I think we could just be looking at a horse who is an American turf horse phenomenon for this season. And I thought at the start of the year, Tom, that he might go through the year unbeaten in America, and this is his starting point.
Yeah, he's got a great chance in here. Number 4 is Aban. Now, he's one horse that Yabir will have to run down because Aban has tactical speed. Took a while for the penny to click with this horse, trained by Todd Pletcher, but he's done well since being upped in trip. He's yet to win a grade 1 or 2, which means he gets £4 from Gufo and Yabir. He's 9-2 on the morning line. I think he'll turn for home in front. Can he hold on?
I'm getting the majority of the ex-Europeans as well because number 5 is Highland Chief, a horse that we know from the Coles, who, again, has only had one run over in America so far, and it was a horrible run that day. Was posted out last, was 12th of 12, managed to finish 9th in the end, but he was never ever getting into the race. And he's not really a miler either. He was running over that kind of trip, an extended mile as we'd call it, over in the UK. He did close, he did shape quite nicely. This is a lot harder for him, but this is also more like his trip. And obviously we know from his time over in the UK, he is a very good horse.
Yes, and the final horse to round out this year's Man of War is number 6, So High. This is another ex-British trained runner. He was trained by John Gosden. He won a Lingfield novice event before being sent out to the US. He looks like the pace in this field, but he's generally not competed at this high level. Actually, he's been beaten at allowance level a fair few times. His trainer, Untitled Chapter, is also 0 from 22 this season. He has a lot to prove, but he should be the pace in this field.
Yeah, thank goodness he is here as well. As we'll jump more into the analysis now, and the pace is where we will start. It kind of starts and ends at So High, maybe at a barn, but I kind of feel that if a barn tries to go a decent gallop, he's just going to give the race on a plate to Yabir.
Yeah, I imagine a barn will sit second early on. This is a horse that's had plenty of chances in his career. As I say, the pennies only started to click recently, and that's because he's been going out hard from the front at the likes of Gulfstream and holding on. He's got plenty of stamina. However, I do think he'll sit second. So High, as you mentioned, is the pace. He'll just blaze to the front. Last year in the Man of War, he finished 5th. He tried to lead, but the likes of Channel Cat and Field Pass were in the field, and he just couldn't get to the front. He was 3rd early, he had to go 6 wide, etc. I think the target for So High is to get the early advantage and hope to hang on. A barn in second. Then you've got the 2 European horses. Easter will be probably 3rd. And then right at the back will be Yabir and Gufo. Hopefully the pace will collapse. I'm pretty sure it will. And then we'll get the proper match between the 2 big horses in here, Luke.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we mentioned the morning lines. Even money, Yabir, Gufo 7-5. I said to you earlier in the week, if the forecast straight Yabir to beat Gufo was about 6-4 or so, I don't think that would be a bad bet at all. These 2 are just a lot better in my mind than the rest, and the rest are playing for 3rd place. We'll touch on Gufo because this is a horse who, I mean, he came onto my mind during lockdown. Really, because he was running at a Gulfstream. He went to a few other places as well, and I managed to keep on improving. But he was second to Channel Cat here last year. You've mentioned that already. He was well beaten in the Breeders' Cup Turf, but he was about 7-1 or so in the Breeders' Cup Turf. He was the real plunge horse on the day. I mentioned to you that evening, I think he'll run all right, but that was more heart than head, and the heart was wrong.
Yeah, I think the East Coast is the ideal spot for Gufo. He's always got a great chance in these races because, as I've already mentioned, he's got the acceleration and the turn of foot that plenty of these horses running over this trip don't have. As I say, he's prolific in his career. Most of those victories have come in New York. He's a major player in here, Luke. He won the Pan American, last time out. It was a very good effort, but that race was run to suit. They went hard early. Gufo just angled to the middle of the track, finished well, inhaled the leader. And maybe it'll be the similar case this time around, but he's going to have to outkick Yabir. I don't know if he'll do that.
Yeah, and one thing that we should say about Yabir, over in England, he's a very good Group 2 horse, I'd say. He's just a different horse over in America. Obviously, the American turf scene, especially over this sort of trip around the 1.5 mile division, it's not quite that strong. Yabir, when he goes over, he's just a different sort of horse. He's like I say, 2 from 2 over in America, and I can just see him being a different beast once again this season.
Yeah, I agree. His 2 victories, we should mention, include the Jockey Club Derby, which came at Belmont Park. So he's got course form. The other was in the Breeders' Cup Turf. And even then, he was ridden out the back. He was keen early. Even though they went hard up front, the rest of the pack kind of stood in a big group. And they didn't go very hard. And he was right at the back of that group, pulling out the arms of William Buick. Yet he still finished with a flourish past Broome in the closing stages. This is a horse that relishes firm ground. He's got an incredible turn of foot. As you say, he's got the class, being a Group 2, Group 1 horse over here. 2 from 2 in the US. Charlie Appleby last year couldn't miss with his US or Canadian runners. Surely he's the horse to beat. One
question I'm going to put to you that I don't quite know the answer to, but I'm intrigued. What's your 1, 2, 3 in this race?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yabir is my strong selection. As you say, if it's anything like even money, then he's a massive play for me. I can't really see him being beat unless he's too keen. Gufo second, unoriginal forecast, but he's the second best horse in the race. Good question about 3rd. Depends how quick they go up front. If I was to play a TriCast, I'd probably play Easter because I think he's the 3rd best horse. But a barn could just hold off Easter. If they go slow up front, Louis Sires takes over the pace, heading for home, and then sticks on for 3rd. I'm not sure. I would play Easter just at the prices, but I'm intrigued to see what your TriCast would be.
Finally, we disagree on something on this week's podcast. I'd go Yabir.
Yeah.
I'd go Gufo. I think that's as close to being a nailed-on forecast as you can find. I like Highland Chief. I really think he's got a strong chance of running 3rd. I don't think there's much between him and Easter. I think it is between the 2. I don't know why, but I really don't like a barn in this race. Mm-hmm. Even though he could get a really nice setup, I just don't think he's, without being mean, I don't think he's that good. He's been running in some okay races at Gulfstream, and then suddenly Gufo comes back, and Gufo absolutely smacks him off the track last time around, when a barn had everything go perfectly for him. That needs to be said. Everything was absolutely spot on that day. Gufo came from the back when he was given quite a lot to do, as he normally is, and he pretty much went by him, not quite on the bridle, but it was pretty much hands and heels. Highland Chief, we know, is a good horse over on these shores. He had a horrible run of things on his American debut. I'd go, if I was doing the 6, because why not? Yabir, Gufo, Highland Chief, Easter, a barn so high.
I mean, it's optimistic to do the 6. I'll tell you what, considering we didn't manage the natural winner last week, if you can somehow rack up the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the Man of War, then fair play. I think Highland Chief's going to finish 5th. My one issue with him is the fact that he seems to prefer soft ground, and like rattling fast ground in New York, it might not be ideal for him. Yes, he had a tricky run at Aqueduct on his stateside debut, as you mentioned, but I don't think he actually showed enough to contest this race. Yes, he won at Royal Ascot. He won the Golden Gate Handicap back in 2020. He is a good horse on his day. I'm not convinced about the ground. I think Easter will run home from mid-div, not as quickly as Yabir and Gufo. Aban, I agree, not as classy, but probably the best tactical horse in the race. So high won't contest the finish, not good enough. And then we'll see what Highland Chief turns up.
Do you want a fun fact about Highland Chief?
Go on.
He was the first Glen Eagles to run.
Phenomenal fact, that. 16-1,
won at Newbury. Yeah, that's it. It's not really that much of a fun fact. It's just a nerd fact, if anything else. we'll steer away from Belmont, and we'll have a look a bit more closer to home. As you know, it's not just the US Racing Podcast. It's the Saturday Night Selections. Saturday Night Racing brings in Doncaster over in the UK. Tom, you've got 1. I've got 2. Who is your 1?
Yes, just 1 selection, Doncaster. Actually, I'm more confident about this selection than I was last week. I know in hindsight, with 2 losers, you can easily say that. But last week's Thirst card was very difficult on Saturday. This Doncaster card, I think you can get at. And there's one horse that I really like, which is Fresh Hope in the 8-10. Its daughter of New Approach is a half-sister to a horse called Declared Interest, who's rated 98 and was last seen in October, running to a mark of 98 and finishing 3rd in a listed event. I think Fresh Hope will develop into a similar kind of horse as Declared Interest, but Fresh Hope has only been awarded an opening mark of 78. There's plenty of room for manoeuvre there. She ran a great promise in 2 starts last year. Her reappearance, she got stuffed at 4-7. Some people are harsh with facts like that, and they'll be like, oh, she's been beaten at a short price, I'm not going to be with her again. She finished 3rd at Weatherby in a race where she travelled the best throughout. Jamie Spencer was looking over his shoulder thinking, God, I've got this on a plate. The horse then, unfortunately, weakened, faltered in the closing stages. She was coming back off a layoff. And the winner of that race was Rogue Millennium. Last week, she won the Lingfield Oaks Trial, in great fashion for Tom Clover. I think that Weatherby event was good for the grade. Fresh Hope will take a step forward and hopefully win this race, the 8-10 at Doncaster.
Yeah, that's a little bit later on. Mine are generally earlier on in the day. Bookmark is the main one who runs in the 5:33 at Doncaster. He'd be close anyway to be my nap of the day, but has joined the Mark Loughnane team, was a decent 3rd on that first start for his new stable. That was a better run that needs upgrading as well, because Pontefract, I think I mentioned actually on the show last week, nothing's been making up ground from the back of the field. You have to be on the front end, or at least in the first, 3 or 4. Bookmark missed the break. He ran around more at the back of the field, and then he made a good bit of ground into the race as they sort of approached 5 furlongs left to go, and he managed to finish 3rd. Like I say, he was about the only horse to make up any sort of ground that night. I think that's a run that really needs to be upgraded a fair bit. And in the 6:35 at Doncaster as well, I really like Sip and Smile as an individual for George Bowie. I think he could be a handicapper that's going to go places this season. He's only rated 77. Ross Coakley taking the ride. Last time at Ascot, there was a little bit of greenness still. Did the Ascot thing, I don't know why horses do it, but hung left as they come up towards the line. He still managed to run on and finish 3rd. Before that, he had excuses at Kempton when things didn't go right, was very wide and finished 6th. They gelded him just after that. And then Doncaster, the time after, it was again, much like Pontefract, a day that you were just having races dominated from the front, which is pretty unlike Doncaster, but up to 7 furlongs, that's going to be no issue back here. And I think Sip and Smile may well take a fair bit of beating in the 6:35.
Just a word on Sip and Smile there.
Go on.
Obviously, George Bowie being an SBK ambassador, but you get the inside track on a few of these horses, and Sip and Smile was featured in George Bowie's Horses to Follow this year. He said the Britannia at Ascot could be the target for him. So if he's right about that, then he's probably well handicapped and you could be spot on.
I mean, he ought to win that as well if he's going for the Britannia. But yeah, hopefully Sip and Smile can win on the way towards the Britannia. Whether he wins the Britannia, I don't know, but I think he wins at Doncaster at the very least. But we'll get back to selections over in America in a few moments' time. We do have questions in. We've got a Q&A. If you want to get involved in the Q&A as well, if you're on YouTube, leave a comment down below. I've always wanted to do that. Leave a comment down below, like the video, and do all that stuff. But first question, this is a left field one as well. We start off with a question from Martin. It says, who is your favorite Parks-based jockey?
I mean, it's just a phenomenal question, isn't it, Luke?
I mean, Parks is not a track that I would focus too much of my attention on. So, Tom, you have the floor.
Yeah, I mean, if you like US racing on a Monday night, then Parks could be your bag. Thank you, Martin, for tweeting me with the question. Stats tell you that Ruben Silvera is the number one jockey. He's been the leading rider at Parks for the last 2 years. He gets on a fair few mounts as well and tends to ride in every race, which obviously helps you racking up the tally of winners. However, the jockey I would focus on, if you like your racing at Parks, is Jamie Rodriguez. He's got currently a 28% strike rate at Parks, which is obviously Philadelphia for those of you that play there. And he often rides for a trainer called Jamie Ness, who has a phenomenal record with horses off the claim. He's kind of in the same ilk as Steve Asmussen, just doesn't have the same level of horse as Asmussen does. When Jamie Rodriguez teams up with Ness, they tend to strike very often. And when they send one to Parks, they're ones to follow.
Yeah, I think I've had about 4 bets at Parks in my life, and I don't think I've backed a winner, so I don't have a favourite at the moment. I'll leave that to you. But Martin, thank you very much for that question. Gabrielle's emailed in. What are your top 3? I like this question. What are your top 3 US races, and why do you like them?
Okay, should we alternate and do number 1, number 2, number 3?
We'll start at 3 and then work your way up.
All right,
a crescendo. Okay,
cool. My third best race. My third favourite race in the US would be the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. Now, many people would probably say, why the Turf Sprint? Because this is actually the only Breeders' Cup race I'm going to mention. But it's an event that draws a competitive field with runners from all around the globe. There are win-in qualifiers in England, Ireland, France, and Japan. Obviously, you've got the US runners as well, which will dominate the field. So you tend to have at least one sprinter from each part of the globe. It's brilliant to compare form. Last year, we saw Golden Pal absolutely bolt up in the race. You get to see the fastest horses around. I just think the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint is one of the best races of the year around the globe, let alone just in the US. However, it just comes in at my number 3.
I'm going to start off high key, but probably my only entry on dirt, which is the Kentucky Derby. It's just a sensational race. It's you saw our excitement last week. It's about one of the only races in America where even people in England that don't like American racing, they're still going to watch it. They might tweet that they hate it, but you're still watching it. Like you're still putting in the effort. The Kentucky Derby. I don't need to explain why I like the Kentucky Derby. It's the Kentucky Derby.
Exactly that. Number 2 for me is the Champagne Stakes. An intriguing entry here, probably not high on most people's list, but it's the prime 2-year-old event run in New York every year. It takes place in October. Recent winners of this race include the likes of Scat Daddy, Uncle Mo, Jack Christopher, Tiz the Law, one of my favourite horses of all time, and 2 years ago, Jackie's Warrior. It's a race where you tend to find the best 2-year-olds, and I'm really looking forward to this year's renewal in October.
I'm going to go for the Breeders' Cup Turf next. It's a race that, even before I properly got into American racing, I just loved the English horses going over and the European horses going over and trying to take on the Americans. It's obviously a race that the UK won last year with a horse that we mentioned in this podcast quite a lot, in Yabir. They've had a fair bit of luck in it throughout the course of the last 10 to 15 years and further as well. But I just love the Breeders' Cup Turf, mainly because it's a good opportunity to go and spank the Americans in their own backyard.
Indeed. My number 1, you've already mentioned it. It has to be my number 1, the Kentucky Derby. I won't touch on it too long. It's just an anomaly. There's no 3-year-old race around like it. There's no race around like it. Obviously, it's run on the dirt. It's the only time in the US you'll get 20 runners in a race. The whole spectacle is brilliant. The US coverage is phenomenal. The event is unmatched. Kentucky Derby, number 1.
Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. I love it. It's again, it's a chance for English horses to go over and take on the American horses, but it's also a lot of unknowns as well. Obviously, it's a race that the English, the Europeans have had a bit of luck in the last few years, but it's also a race in our betting markets over here that Americans are often overlooked. They're generally disrespected in these sort of races, but it's also a race full of excitement as well. I remember I went to Santa Anita for the Breeders' Cup 2016 off the top of my head. Lancaster Bomber was running, and all the Americans are saying this horse had no chance because he was running behind, it was either Glen Eagles or Churchill in all the top 2-year-old races in the UK. But to see horses realize that potential and run well, I just love it. That will always, I'm going to strongly say this, that will always be my favorite American race.
I like it. Yeah, it didn't feature in my top 3, but I can see the angle there. 2-year-old races are something else, especially in the US. I think the hype over there is far greater than over here for juveniles. So I can see why you put that as your number 1.
Yeah, number 2, number 3, they might change. That's number 1. Screw that in. That's absolutely fine. And the final question from Steve: what are the first things you look for when studying a US card? Jockeys, trainers, speed figures, etc.
Yeah, this is a very good question. Thanks, Steve, for tweeting me this one. I'll keep it short because I probably could rattle on for about half an hour this. My advice would be to not try to cover every single base, whether that's looking at every single card across the US, every single type of race, looking at everything you can with a race. I think you've got to hone in on the specifics. I tend to focus on certain types of races. And then when you look at a race, number one thing, and I'm sure you're going to agree with me, Luke, is you've got to find out where the speed's coming from and how quick they're going to go. If you can work out the pace scenario, you have a much better chance of finding the winner. It's not like over here where they could just dawdle through a mile. There's 3 front runners and they're all held up. Like horses in America tend to run the same way each and every time. You can kind of work out how the pace is going to pan out in every single race. As I say, if you can find out the leader and you know that there's only 1 front runner in the race and they're going to go slow early, that horse has a phenomenal chance. 2 other things to mention briefly: trainers and jockeys. I think the discrepancy between good and bad trainers, good and bad jockeys over in America is far greater than over here. So backing a horse that's trained by, the likes of Chad Brown, Todd Pletcher, etc., would be much more attractive to me than backing a horse trained by the likes of Charlie Appleby over here. Not because Charlie Appleby is nowhere near as good. Of course, he's as good, if not better. But you have so many good trainers in the UK. Same with riders. And the last thing is class droppers. Now, this doesn't apply to group races, graded races. But in claimers, if a horse has been running for 25,000, which is how much a horse is entered into the race for and then can be claimed for after the race, if they've been running for 25k and they're suddenly in a race where they're going to be claimed for 10k, you've got to work out whether that's a good or a bad class drop. Has the horse been performing well recently, or are they just dropping down the level to see that this horse can move yards, basically get rid of the horse, or are they dropping down just to get a win under this horse's belt? You'll get plenty of good bets with class droppers, but they'd be my main angles.
Yeah, my main one, these are my notes. Well done, Luke. Pace. It's the first one. You have to look at the pace first time around. And it'd be a similar way that I'd look at English races, but not quite as key on pace. We mentioned it last week for the Kentucky Derby. There are about 7 pace angles in the contest. You then have to work out which ones of those are going to lead, which of the outside horses are going to try and come across and hamper the hold-up horses. We mentioned Mo Donegal. He was drawn in stall 1. Nightmare draw for him because he's going to get a ton of kickback. He's not going to be quickly away. It's a horrible, horrible draw. Zandon, hold-up horse, he was drawn out a bit further. Was he 8? Was he
10?
10. That's fine for him. He's going to do whatever he wants to do from that. Mo Donegal had 1 place to go. He couldn't win from stall 1, as we said last week. The pace for the Man of War, 6, maybe 4. You're going to have an outsider leading. That pace might just fall apart at a touch. And obviously you do get races as well where American jockeys ride to what their horse wants. Whether someone else is going to try and go faster than them doesn't matter. They're going to try and take them on. And a lot of the time, I know there's a misconception with dirt racing, and I used to have it as well when I was younger, before I fully got invested in US racing and gave it a go. The line of, well, on dirt, the horse that gets to the front wins. At tracks like Maidan, that might work, yeah, but they go more of a sensible gallop as well at Maidan. In America, you can see horses lead to the furlong pole and then they can finish last just because they've gone so hard early on. Pace is so key over in America. That's the first thing you must look at. But thank you to everyone for getting their questions in. If you've got a question you want to leave for us and you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment in the comment section below. If you are on Twitter, send a question to Tom. I will be setting up a new Twitter because they don't like me next week. so wherever that is, whatever that name is, then I'll be fielding questions as well. But we'll get to a few more on next week's podcast. Don't forget as well, on SBK, new SBK customers will get £30 in free bets by depositing at £10. Obviously, though, you took advantage of that last week and you had the free £30 on Rich Strike. So well done to you on that. But if you didn't, you can do that. T's and C's do apply. One final thing. Man of War, we're both with your beer.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to get even money or anything like even money, your beer's a phenomenal bet. Probably my nap of the week. Obviously, what I should mention is currently on SBK, we don't have prices, but we will by the time this podcast goes live, which is why we're quoting the morning line prices. We're saying if we get even money, fingers crossed, because I hope we do. I think it's a great bet, Luke.
Yeah. Odds compilers, even money. It should be even money. Should definitely be even money. Honestly, what price do you think your beer would be? I would put him at 2 to 5.
Are you talking opening show or are you talking SP?
SP. What price he should be when the market's actually saturated? I
think in the US he'll go off 3 to 5. Over here, I think he'll probably go off around 4 to 7, just because Gufo's in there. I think he deserves to be 1 to 2, 2 to 5.
Yeah. Either way, play the forecast on your beer and Gufo. But that's it. Tom, thank you very much for your company once again.
Thank you very much, Luke. Hopefully we get a couple of winners this week.
Yes, we'll be back with Preakness Day next week over at Pimlico, where at the moment, myself and Tom agree, but that could well change. We'll see Epicenter take on a whole host of horses. Secret Oath, the Kentucky Oaks winner, may well be in the Preakness as well. But that's coming up next week on the SBK Saturday Night Selections. For this week, let's just hope that your beer can come home in front and provide Charlie Appleby with another US winner. We'll see you in a week's time. Until then, stay safe, look after one another. Goodbye.